Okay, so what I would like to do here, the next 3 weeks, the first week, today, what we're going to do is look at the foundations of Daoism and Confucianism. So this is, thinking about the Chinese way of how the Chinese understands the world. Now, when I say Chinese, I'm referring to uh, all Chinese, but this is perhaps not accurate because you're bound to find Chinese that may think differently from what I'm saying, what I'm sharing here. But it's kind of like a generalization, an overview of a way of thinking that has been predominant in Asian cultures, particularly in China, Korea, and Japan. Okay, so next week we'll look at some of the main themes within, I don't know, either Taoism or Confucianism. We'll do one or the other, and then the third week we'll do the other one. Okay, I haven't decided yet which one we'll do first, either Taoism or Confucianism. But that's how the next 3 weeks are separated in kind of the underlying foundations of Taoism and Confucianism. Then we'll look at Confucianism. Then we'll look at Taoism. Okay, so some main concepts, some concepts that we want to get. These are the definitions. We should know the definitions of these: yin and yang, right? Yin and yang, divination. What does that mean? Spirits, Tian, heaven, the mandate of heaven, and the way, the Tao. These are all really central concepts to both Confucianism and Taoism. So we're going to look at these 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 concepts right now. And so let's first make a comparison between the way that the West sees the world and the way that, for the most part, as a generalization, a Chinese perspective on the world. So first of all, in the West, we have this idea that a person has an essence. And in Buddhism, we just mentioned that about how there's no essence, no self. Chinese, pre-Taoist and Confucian way of thinking doesn't have this idea of no self, but they still have this idea of no essence. That human beings are not individuals, but what we are a combination of relationships. In other words, when I'm teaching, I'm a teacher. I'm only a teacher because there are students. If there were no students, I wouldn't be a teacher. When I'm with my son, I'm a father. If I didn't have a son, I would not be a father. So who I am in any given moment is based on the relationship that I'm in. From a monotheistic perspective, there is the idea that there has been a creator of the world, right? That the world has been created. It has, that creativity has a beginning point. In the beginning was the world. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, right? And there's this whole origination story, where we all come from. And in our movies, if you watch any movie, you'll find most movies, many movies, I shouldn't say every movie, but many movies will have this idea of good versus evil on some level. Either it's blatant, it's explicit, or it's a kind of an underlying theme. Really good movies blur this sharp distinction between good and evil. But for the most part, when we're watching almost any flick, we're seeing the ideas that good is something that will prevail and will destroy evil, that there are good people and there's bad people, there's good actions and there's bad actions. Let's look at the Asian or the Chinese kind of assumptions about the world. One big one here that's hard to get our minds wrapped around is this idea that there's not necessarily a creator of everything, right? So there's no central creation myth that everybody kind of revolves around. The world doesn't revolve around a creator. The world is not necessarily did not necessarily have a created beginning point, but rather every moment is creation. So in other words, to say that the world was created at one point, well, where is the evidence for that? Can we point to one thing and say, we come into the world and the world is. And to say that there must be a creator is an assumption and is also a Western bias to say that there must have been a creator to the world. From a Chinese perspective, the world is. We come into the world. And there wasn't really an important need to discover how the world came to be. The world is. The main thing is that we have to figure out how to live in this world. We have to figure out who we are and how to live in it. And for Chinese, that did not necessarily lead to a need for having a creation story, a general creation story. Now that's a little bit different from Hindus, right? Because there are creation stories within Hinduism, but not in Chinese, not necessarily in the Chinese mode of thinking. If there are creation stories, someone may be able to find a Chinese creation myth, but it doesn't play a central role. I think the idea we have to get our minds wrapped around is that there is this thing called ongoing creativity. Every moment is a moment of creation and possibility. All beings are connected, and good and evil they're not pitted against each other. And this is where the concept of yin and yang comes in. All right, so this symbol here, maybe you've seen it before, yin yang, right? And this here, these lines, these broken and solid lines, have to do with divination. Divination meaning divining the future, understanding the world, what's going to happen, and basing your actions on what you learn about the future. And these lines, these solid and broken lines, gave emperors, gave rulers an idea. They helped them to plan out what should they do. Should they plant the field? Should they attack their neighbors? Should they do something else? So when there is a big decision to be made, the diviners, the shamans would be called and solicited for their the processes, and we'll look at that, the processes for how they came to understand what should we do in this situation. Yin and yang has to do with the balance, the cosmic balance of the universe. All things are comprised of yin and yang. You and me have yin and yang. And yin and yang are referring to, on an atomic level, the positive and the negative forces of life. What underlies yin and yang is what's called the life force, or qi. The word for Tai Chi, the kind of exercise, or Qi Gong. This is another place where Qi is used. Qi Gong, Tai Chi. These are kinds of Chinese calisthenics. The Japanese word for that is Qi. So Chinese call it Qi, this life force, and the Japanese call it Qi. So what I like to do is share with you a video on this concept of qi. Very central to Chinese way of thinking. Okay, so I'm assuming you can see this shift on my screen. Let me know if not. Oh, hold on a second. Bear with me.